So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at how we can take all of our work, have it displayed in a really high quality way inside of UE4 and do some best practices for showing off our work in a way that's professional and ready for a portfolio. So I've actually made a video about a lot of the different things that we're going to talk about in this video. And if you want a really good description of everything that's laid out pretty meticulously, you can go to my YouTube channel. You can find this video that's called High Quality Rendering in UE4. And you can see here's the table of contents, all the different things that we'll take a look at. So like we're going to, for our project, create an infinity wall and use an infinity wall. And this video goes into length in talking about what that actually is. And that's just something they use in photography to make a nice kind of gradated background so you don't get a harsh line back behind your subject matter that you have. And there we use some spotlights and a skylight. We do exponential height fog so we can get some nice atmospherics going in within the scene and kind of make it to where it knocks out the background a little bit. Planar reflections so you can get good looking reflections underneath the object that you've got. Sphere reflection capture actors, and those are placed within your scene to get better looking reflections on your object. The post-process volume, talking about that and how you can add some different things. I think I put some noise within there and maybe some bloom and some other things in there. And then I do go in to talk about master and material instances in there. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the materials, you can go in there. And then I set up a blueprint, I believe, to get the objects kind of rotating in place. And then we take a look at sequencer inside of UE4. So sequencer is going to let you set up different camera moves and things like that. So go over and take a look at that video. I think it would be well worth your time to take a look at that video. And then after that, jump into this video that we're going to be covering here. And I'm going to just do very high level for this video that we're going to be covering, and then mainly relying on you taking a look at this high quality rendering in UE4 to get a really deep dive, like how do you get this really high quality look inside of the engine, and use all these different techniques to show it off in a very professional way. So one thing that's really nice about UE4 is that it's really easy after you've set up some meshes or materials and you've got it in one project. It's really easy to copy that material and put it into another project. Now, if you have the same folder structure and the same place where things are going to go, things work out really well for this. So like I've got an infinity wall from the video that I was telling you about, and I was able to just drag in that infinity wall and put it into my meshes area on this project, which is under geometry and then meshes. So you can see right here, and that sits under content. So we've got content, geometry, meshes, and I was able to drag in the infinity wall from one project to the other, and then it just shows up right away. So anytime you need to take something from an old project and then carry it into a different project, just know that that's available for you. Now, if you don't have it in the same area, you can build the folder structure. You could always take an asset, and it's possible for you to take an asset and you can move it to a different section. You could move it or you could copy it. And at that point, if you copy it, you got a new version of it and you can give it a different name. If you move it, it updates the information for where that thing actually sits within there. Okay, so I wanted to make sure you knew that before we get started, because I'm going to use the infinity wall. And then from there, I'll just take everything and kind of build it out. So I'm just going to go and start a brand new scene. So we're going to just say File, New Level, like this. And we have options for what we can create. We can create just from a blank, purely blank, black, empty level. We can start from this default level that's going to have a sky sphere in there, and it's going to have some lighting information, some atmospherics and things like that. And it's got this little plane that you can start on. You got a VR basic template that you can start with, a VR scene. And then they have this also this time of day scene that you can do. So because we're doing this kind of product shot and I want to have a lot of control over things, I'm just going to go ahead and choose the empty level, and it's going to make a brand new blank level forest with no lighting. There's absolutely nothing in here. And then I'll just take the infinity wall and then click and then drag it into the scene. I'm going to set it to movable right away and then go over here to the details panel and set it to 0, 0, 0, and then just have this sit in the center of the world that you see here like this. Okay, so that'll be the first step that we do for this project to just get it in place, and we'll start adding our cannon to this now. So if we go over to where I put my section and I called it final model, and then we've got our meshes, we've got our Canon game res, and then go ahead and click and drag that out. And then I'm going to put this to movable as well, and I'll put this to 0, 0, 0. And the reason I'm setting it to movable, I like to have everything dynamic for the lighting on here. So I'm just going to frame this thing up, and any new scene that you have, if you hit Control 1, that'll make a camera view for you. If you move it around a little bit more, you can hit Control 2, that'll make a new camera for you. And I'll do Control 3, like this. And then maybe, let's do this. Get to the top of it. Control 4, and then maybe I'll do a really high up Control 5, and then go to the back, and then hit Control 6. So now if I tap 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, I've saved different camera views for us. I think this is pretty important because you might accidentally maybe select the this infinity wall that we have and maybe get zoomed out really far. And if you do that, if you get really far out in the scene, you'll have to navigate back into the scene. But if we save those camera views, we can just tap 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it'll make it really easy for us to get back to where we're at. I think I'm going to take the infinity wall, and I'm also going to make sure that all this is locked. So this locks all X, Y, and Z scale all together. And I'll just maybe make this like 4, and then this should make this like a really, really large thing to look at. So if we don't have any lights in the scene, it's going to basically act like it's unlit, like this. So it's a little bit different, but now if I put it back on this lit, you can see everything goes pure black on us at that point. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is go to the lights area, and I'm going to go get a spotlight, and then just add a spotlight in and just drag it in like this. I'm still going to go and put this in movable, and if you hover your cursor over, you can see the different lighting types, which is telling you it's totally dynamic. It's going to tell you this is the most expensive, this is middle of the road, and this is the cheapest version that you can get there. So again, if you want to go in deep, go to the video that I was telling you about, but I'm just going to go through this pretty quickly. And so I'm just going to take the spotlight, I'm going to raise it up. I'll do an inner cone of, let's say 30, and then an outer cone of not 80, let's do 60, somewhere in there, maybe even 50. I'll do 55 right there, sorry. So I'm just going to raise this up a bit more, and then I'll take the intensity, drag it up to somewhere around 16 or so. So this is going to give me a light. It's going to look pretty nice. I'm going to pull this forward a little bit, and then at that point I'll rotate the light back just a little bit like this. And then the other thing I'm going to do is drag in a skylight. And so then I'll put this to movable as well, set this to 0, 0, 0, and then I'll move this up within here. Now with the skylight, I'm going to use the engine content that they have. I was going to find, basically, if I go into the engine content and type in HDRI, or HDR, I can find a map within here that I can plug into the skylight. So SLS capture scene is going to try to capture the scene. There's not a whole lot going on lighting wise to build some lighting with this, but if I put it on the specified cube map, I can plug the HDRI file into there, and that will start to light the scene that way. Now depending on the intensity that we have, let's see, if we get something like this, I think I'm going to take my spotlight and then continue to drag it forward this way a bit more. And then if I wanted a little bit of angle of the light from the front here, then I can kind of rotate this back a little bit like that. And I might still keep playing with the intensity to get it somewhere in here. And if I tap G, I can turn the controls off that so I can see that. So it's still pretty darn dark in the other areas, like in the back in here. So if we go back to our skylight and we start to crank that up to 2 or so, it's pretty high on there. Now you can see it's picking up a lot of the colors for like the blues and things like that within there. Now if we want, what we could do is go to content, and if I did this, I'm going to hit that little X to get that off there, and then if I made a new folder and called this HDRI like this, we could actually import in maps from Substance, right? So I'm actually navigating to the C drive, program files, logarithmic, Substance Painter resources. If you go to this area with the shelf, you can go to the environments and get the actual HDRI files from Substance if you want to plug that into your scene. So if you want to have a very similar HDRI setup in UE4 for what you have in Substance, you need to grab those maps. And if I go to the exterior area, panorama is the one that I usually use. I think that's the default one in there. So I'm just going to copy this location like this, and then that folder that I made for myself, I'm going to go in here and say right click and say import into game HDRI, and then I'll just go ahead and paste this and then go to the panorama and hit open and wait for it to import that map in. Okay, so we've got that, and we can double click this and then take a look, and you can see it should open it and recognize that it's an HDR file. And let's go ahead and hit save for that. Close this down. I'll select this and then go back to our skylight, and now I can plug it into this area, and you can see what a difference that made right there for that. So what we can do now is just kind of back off this a little bit and get this set up in through here to get this nice amount of bounce light within here. I don't want it too bright, so I'm just going to kind of get it within this area like this. And if you want, it's possible you can drag in your own point lights right here like this. Let me tap G so I can get this back, and I'll move the light. I'll push it down this way, and I'll set this to movable as well. I don't want this one to cast shadows. So if I type in shadows right here, I can tell it to not cast shadows. And then if I want to tint it slightly, make it like I could make this a little bit of a warmer color. I just wouldn't get too intense with this. We can do the attenuation radius, so we can pull this down for like how far out is this thing going to affect things. And then if we take the intensity, we could drop this down fairly low like this. The other thing is, if we want this to be set up on lighting channels, see how this is affecting the ground right now? And I'm going to turn off our grid. That's just kind of bugging me. If we only want this to affect the Canon, we can go to here and we can type in channels, and we could tell it to, everything will be lit on this channel 0, and that's by default. And then we can say channel 2. And then for the light, we can go here and we'd say channel 2. And then now the only thing that it should light up is this part of the Canon. Now if we took the floor, the infinity wall, and we put on channel 2, you can see it's going to affect that. But right now, the infinity wall only gets everything from channel 0 And if you want something from channel 2 for this light, you have to specify it. So right now, our Canon is set to channel 0 and channel 2, and this light is set to channel 2. And so the Canon is going to be the only thing that actually gets any kind of lighting information from this thing. So I'm going to hit undo for that. Then we could hold down Alt and then drag out a copy of our light and then push this up underneath like this. And so I'm just going to use this just to light this area ever so slightly. So let's turn this off here. And I'm just going to barely put any kind of light on here like this. So let's see, we've got 0.1. Let's do something like 0.05, somewhere in there. And then I'll tap G so I can just keep continuing to check this right here within there like that. And I'll take this point light and I'll raise it up a little bit so you can see how far away it is from there, and we can basically just kind of add a little bit of light to that shadow area. And if we want to push it over here, we can get something going here. Now if we hold down Alt and then drag out another copy of this, we could push this up into the inner part of the Canon and then drag that back a little bit. Right there like that. And then we could back this off quite a bit. So it's just a way of us almost kind of painting with light. And so it might not be obviously like physically accurate and everything else like that, but it's a way for us to kind of stage some of this. Now if I hold down Alt and then click out and drag out another copy, I'll crank up the intensity of this quite a bit, and then this time I'll make this a cooler color so we can take the hue and then spin it around towards the cooler direction. And if we want to make it, you know, really intense, kind of a blue like this in here, I just don't think you want to go too saturated with your lights. It starts to make them look very fake and a bit odd. So I'll take this next point light here and just drag it off a little bit, and I'm going to push this down to underneath the ground plane and then push it. You can see it kind of shades like darker down there after you've pushed it underneath. So we can kind of raise that up, lift that up, and hold down Alt, and then click. And now you can see after we've drag out a few copies of this, it starts to get pretty intense for how much light is on there. So that's when we can start to back this off. So I'll just drop it down. I'll do 0.5. And this is on the back side of the light where we're in shadow, so you don't want to make it too weird with how much light is actually in that area. So if I got these two, I can just back that off a little bit, and then kind of like this one, I kind of want to get a little bit of light in this area of the Canon. I want to highlight some of the stuff that's kind of going on under here, and you can see as we get the light really close, it's really kind of intense saturation wise, and we can back the value off of that a bit. I'll pull this in here, and then I'm just going to drop this back quite a bit. Like that. So now at this point we could move all the way around our object. Anytime dealing with lighting, I want to make sure that I don't have any of the eye adaptation stuff going on with UE4, and that is Basically, if you're in a movie theater and it was dark in there and you came out and it was light, it takes your eyes some time to adjust to that. But that really throws everything off as far as setting up lighting and knowing exactly what it is that you're actually building with your lighting. So if you go to Edit and then do Project Settings, and then we go to Rendering, let's find this. And then we go to the default settings area down within here, and then we have auto exposure. Make sure that that's turned off. Okay, so that was already turned off in the project, but if you didn't have that, that could cause some weird lighting issues, and you might be surprised how much your lighting changes as soon as you turn that off. Another way to do that is to, we'll throw in a post-process node. But before we do that, I usually like to take all my lights and everything I'm doing with lighting and atmosphere and throw it in a folder just to make it easy to get to. Now, if you want to be even more organized, you could like take all your point lights and call this point lights like this. And it could be a way that you could turn those contributions on and off pretty quickly, just so you can see what's going on with that. So you can see if we turn off all the lights, we should get something like this. Now it does seem very odd that we're going to be getting any kind of lighting on here. I did find that with the Skylihgt, you just turning off and on this visibility didn't really work the way that I expected. I had to go in here, and there for most things, if you type in visibility, you can turn on and off the visibility. So there you go. All that lighting was actually coming from the Skylihgt. Now, again, I'm not sure why the eye icon doesn't turn that on and off, but it does for other things. Just note that that's something you might have to deal with. Okay, so if we go to visual effects and we take our post-process volume, we'll click that and drag that in. If I tap G, you can see we've got our post-process volume. I do think that's something that should probably go with lighting and atmosphere as well. And if we go to the very bottom area of this, you can see that there is this thing, it's enabled, and then we can tell it to say infinite extent unbound. So that just means this volume will go on forever. Otherwise, this post-process volume only works in this particular area. So if your camera sits inside the volume, then it works, and if it doesn't, it's not in there. And you can blend between different post-process volumes. So in one room, you could have a reddish tint and all these different effects going on. In one room, in another room, it's got a completely different effect. So it's actually a really cool thing. But for what we're doing, we only need just one thing, so we're not really worried about that. So if we just click that, that'll fill the entire world for us. I like to just still set it at the 0, 0 place, and if you want just visually make it a little bit bigger, so you can see the extents of it. Maybe I'll make it like 2, something in there. So that size doesn't really matter anymore. But within post-process, if you go back to that video I was telling you about, there's a lot of different things that we can go and tweak in there. Exposure, but if you want to do this min max brightness, and this is basically the eye adaptation thing. So if you want to override, if you have it in your scene and you want to override it, you can put this min max brightness to 1 and 1, so it just clamps the values that you have there. If you want to turn bloom on, you could turn bloom, and I think if we put on standard, I just usually like to overdrive things just to see and make sure that they're working. If we take this threshold, if we crank this here, we can kind of reduce the area that the bloom is interacting with like this. So maybe we put something like there. It's just a slight change. If you want to have it on there, go ahead, have it on there. I do like chromatic aberration, so if we put the intensity on that, and that's going to be a really high number, do something like 0.5. I just think it just adds just a little bit to make it feel a little bit more like a cinematic kind of camera. So that's not a bad setting to have. The other thing that might be kind of nice to put on there is if you go to image effects and you do vignette, you can darken the outer part. So that feels pretty close to me to like what is going on in inside of Substance. I like to turn that on within there. Grain. This is adding noise to your image. Sorry, this is the grain jitter, and then grain intensity. You can see it adds a bit of noise to the image, and you might just want to put just a slight amount of grain on there, like that. Okay. Okay, let's look at this area now. Color grading. You could do what is called a lookup table or a LUT, and that changes the look of your image quite a bit. So you could actually do things like in Photoshop if you found UE4 has a default lookup table and it's just a little small image, and if you apply that image to this area, it's going to drastically change everything about the colors and everything else like that. So you would definitely want to look up a tutorial on that, on how to do that. But if you enable this, if you go and then just type in LUT, you can find some different LUTs that they have. So this one's a afternoon, and then this one's a daytime, morning, and then night. But you can set up your own lookup table depending on what it is that you're going for. And again, if you find the default LUT from UE4 and it exists within, I believe, the engine content, if not, you'll be able to find it online. You can go into Photoshop and you can do any hue, saturation adjustments, levels, anything like that, right? And if you take all those adjustments and you apply it to this little swatch and name it your own thing, you can plug it in here and it'll pretty much mimic what you got going on inside of Photoshop. So it's actually pretty cool, but I'm going to stay away from that. The other thing we could play around with is depth of field. So if I took my object, hold down Alt, and then click out a copy of this and maybe rotate it a little bit, just at least so we have something to look at as far as copies go. The next thing that we can throw in there is exponential height fog. So we'll just go ahead and drag this into the scene, puts us at 0, 0, 0. I'm just going to tap G so we can kind of see what's going on with this. I'll just raise it up just so we can see the icon for it. Fog density, I'll just put it 10 just so we can just get this thing set up and get it moving. Then also we do have the start distance, and if we push this out like 100, you can see how it's going to start in this area and then push out there. You could do that. That's not a problem. But I think maybe what I want to do is if I take the Z dimension, I can start dropping it down like -500. We also have this fog height fall off, and if I set this to 2, I get a much better kind of gradient for this. So if I drop this down 1,000 like that, you can see what we're starting to get here. And then if I put my start distance at 150, we're getting a little bit of atmosphere in here, and maybe it's coming up on here a little bit. So I'll push that back just a little bit further. And then once that's done, then I can just drop this back a bit like this and then tap G. This is what I was talking about, where it's going to cover up the infinity wall. But the thing is, with the infinity wall, we shouldn't end up getting any kind of harsh line on here. Now, if we do take the infinity wall and we break this relationship between the X, Y, and Z, and if we put this at something like this within here, I think what I'm trying to do is maybe increase it on the Z dimension like this. So let's zoom out a bit just so we can see what's going on. Yeah, I'm trying to increase this, so I probably should have built this a little bit better so it's a nicer kind of slope within here. So I guess actually having it here maybe that's going to do better for us. Let's take a look. I'm just trying to get rid of this this line that we got going on here, and I wouldn't call it necessarily a line. It's just I'm not super happy with the shading on there. So again, it might be something where I might actually need to go and tweak the mesh on that a little bit. But I think this is starting to be like a decent kind of setup within through here. Now I did make a different material for this in this area, so I could actually throw a different material instance on this one here and have a different model altogether, and then push these and then stage these back like this. So if I want to frame this up, actually what I can do is hit F11, and if I do Shift F11, that will get rid of any kind of windows, toolbars or anything like that. If I hit Escape, I can deselect this this thing here. Now I can go back through my cameras, and then I just tapped 1 to get into my camera settings for this. And then maybe I'll just frame this up a bit better. Hit Control 1 again, now 2. And let's zoom in on this a bit better. Like this, I'll hit Control 2, and then 3. Maybe I kind of zoom in like this. At this point, I might push this one here just a little bit like this. Get this one a little bit closer. And maybe pull this one back just ever so slightly. Pull this back here like that. And I'll hit Control 3. So I got 1, 2, 3. Seems to be a nice shot here. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I kind of like this. And if I can get in the back of it, kind of zoom in here, Control 6. So I think that's a pretty good amount of cameras. I can hit F11 to go back again. Shift F11 will bring back the Windows toolbar area. Let's just go ahead and save this map. I'm going to hit save for this. Actually, we haven't given a name. So I'll save this one. With cameras. Like that. Go ahead and save that. And then what we could do at this point is if we hit F11 and we choose one of the views that we want to spit out. I'm trying to think which one I like the most. I think I'll spit this one out. We could do this. We could go to here and we could say high resolution screenshot like this. Now, if we just kick this thing out, it'll give us a 1-to-1. If we do a multiplier on this and say 2, it'll give us something that's twice the resolution. But here's what it says here. Make sure you save before you do this. It could actually crash the system sometimes if you go too high with that. So we'll just go ahead and click take a screenshot like this. And if you are fast enough, you can click on this area down here and you can see what it's going to kick out for us. I'm just going to right click on there and I'm going to open this with Photoshop. So here we are inside of Photoshop, and you can see if we pan around, we've got quite a bit of nice resolution on here. Now if I go to image size and I drop this down 50% of what it was before, I'll go ahead and hit OK for that. And as you drop it down, basically it's going to almost give you a nice, really crisp image. It's going to basically take everything that it took and kind of sample it down. And that could be a way you could spit out the higher image, and then you go into Photoshop, and then you drop it down, and you get some nice detail like that. If you're going to make screenshots for things, the other thing you can do, you can go to Filter, Sharpen, Unsharpen Mask, and then just sharpen it up a bit. So maybe I'll put this on 75%, and you can see as we click and drag on this for the preview, you can see what we're going to get for that. So that looks like a pretty decent screenshot that we have there. And again, as you're in Photoshop, you can always hit Control L. You can bring up levels adjustments, and if you wanted to take some of these and then crank them up a little bit, it's up to you what you want to do for your screenshots like that. I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel. So usually it's okay to kind of tweak things a bit. I would say you'd want to try to get things as close as you possibly can directly within the engine. So again, I'm not going super in depth on this video, just because, like I said, I've given you another video that's about an hour long or so that goes into a lot of different topics and goes into this stuff with great detail. I don't remember on the old video, I don't think I showed you how to pull in the HDR file from something from Substance, but so you at least have that at your disposal, and that you could mess around with some of the different maps that they have. And we looked at adding our own kind of special lights in here to make sure that looks pretty good for things. I think what might be beneficial is if I showed you one more thing within UE4 for this. So as we're in UE4, it is possible for us to use this custom depth mask, and this will help us to be able to separate our objects out from the background. So in order to enable that, you're going to use custom depth as mask like this. You can go to one of your objects and then go into the details panel, and I just typed in custom, and if you turn on this render custom depth pass like this, you can see how it's going to go ahead and create a mask for you with that. It assigns a channel of 0. I was trying to see with each one of these if I assign a different channel. This kept everything together, but I don't think this actually matters. If I put this to 0, it's going to still do the same thing for the custom depth that we have. So I'd have to read up on this a little bit more, but I know that, like, if you're just looking for a down and dirty way to kind of get this thing out of here, you can turn this on, and then at that point, whenever you render and it kicks out the image, you can see this is the latest one that I put out, and I'll open this with Photoshop, and then it's going to render this on a transparent background, so you can easily grab parts, against the background. So it's a nice way to create a mask for things on there. This should at least get you to the point where you can take your models, you can get them set up, put some lighting on there, and get some nice shots set up for your portfolio.